So welcome to everyone that's joined us in the last couple of minutes. We'll give it 2 more minutes and then we'll get cracking directly at 1 o'clock. And we're going to hopefully have things wrapped up within an hour. So Catherine's going to kindly speak for the first half hour of that, something along that line, and then we'll have questions afterwards and we can pick up any conversations after that. So I'm starting to begin my getting out and seeing hospices in person, which is always my favorite. Uh, I think I haven't quite worked it out, but I'm pretty sure I've now personally been to over 100 hospices in the
Have
last
you?
17 years. I think I'm over the 100 now.
That's good going.
It is pretty good going. And, you know, and it's always a joy. You think you know hospice, but
Same.
every single one that I've ever been to, there's been something new, something
Yeah,
different, something exciting that no one else is doing, and you think, oh my God, that's amazing, and why aren't you doing that? And yeah, we passed a mile. I think I said to you, we passed a milestone last year where we've now actively raised money for over a quarter of all UK hospices in a
that's
time.
brilliant.
I mean,
Incredible.
yeah, I mean that's probably as far into it as we're going to be able to get. But that's yeah, that's an absolute. But again, you learn something every time. That's the joy of hospice fundraising, and hopefully, welcome, hello to everyone that's joining us. The great thing about the hospital movement is that sharing of knowledge and information. That's what I hope you're going to get today. Is the download and the experience from mostly from Catherine, but also from us as well. There's lots and lots of knowledge and experience out there, and it's all available and accessible to everybody, and we can all pick up and learn something from every hospice. Right, I got 20 seconds, and then the show begins. Okay, so hope everyone's settled, comfy. Have your lunch while you're listening. It's absolutely fine. We don't mind. We're not going to judge.
Positively encourage it, in fact.
I mean, we're all friends here. You know, there's no one. Yeah, this is a relaxed, informal environment. We're all fine. Right, there you go. My watch says 1 o'clock. So, hello everyone. Welcome officially to this joint webinar. I'd say joint webinar. It's mostly Catherine speaking, and I'll be contributing a little bit. We're thrilled and delighted to have Catherine Bosworth, who's the Director of Income Generation and Grants at Hospice UK, with us. And I'm really, Catherine, so grateful for your time because I think you're going to give us a different perspective, certainly a different perspective than we're capable of giving. Obviously, Pebblebeach, we're an agency that works with predominantly within the hospice movement. We see a lot of things, but we don't move in the same ways and the same circles as you. And I know that at this particular moment in time, with everyone thinking about their budgets and thinking about running a deficit this year and hopefully not running a deficit next year, answering that question, how can we tackle the funding crisis facing the UK hospice movement? Well, that's a big question. There's an answer. If you could be kind enough just to flick to the next slide, please, Catherine, which is just to let people know that this is being recorded and we'll have this up and available
Sorry,
on our
it's not
website.
flicking on, Ash, for some reason.
Okay, if you click on it again, there you go. Click on it again, and then click through. There you go. So there you go. So we're being recorded. If you don't want to be recorded, that's fine. Please switch your camera off. It's not a problem. And this recording will be up and available to you on our website, up on YouTube as well. Obviously, Catherine, I assume you'll take a version of this, and this will be available through Hospice UK as well. So again, it's all
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
sharing and everything available.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're going to try and do is, I think the first half hour, Catherine, you wanted to take us through some points that you wanted to discuss. Guys, if you've got questions, please use the chat function on the Zoom call. If there's something that's really, really pertinent to the things being talked at the moment, we'll probably jump in and see if we can deal with that. But if not, don't worry. We'll hold things until the end, and then we'll pick up the most common questions at the end, and we'll do the best we can to answer those. Okay. So, Catherine, thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ash. And hi, everybody. It's really a big privilege to be here speaking to you today. Always love to speak to fellow fundraisers from the hospices around the UK. So yeah, really delighted to be here. Hopefully a lot of you know me already. For those of you who don't, I'm Catherine Bosworth. I'm the Director of Income Generation at Grants at Hospice UK. So yeah, Ash presented me with this very simple and easy question of how we tackle the funding crisis facing the hospice movement, which made me panic slightly because I'm not even going to attempt to come up with an answer in the next half an hour. But what I would like to do is share a little bit of insight, some ideas with you, and crucially, how we might work together and how we continue the discussion around this, because it's definitely something I think we should all be working on together, and that's certainly where we're coming from. So in terms of kind of how I'm going to go through that, I thought it might be useful to just give you a bit of insight into the current financial situation for the hospice sector collectively. So I've got a few slides to share with you on that, because I think it's we're in a very, very interesting position at the moment. Then some reflections on what I see as the kind of biggest opportunities for us as a sector at the moment, what Hospice UK is doing, crucially, how you can get involved, how you can be part of the conversation, how you can help. And then let's open it up. Let's have your comments, questions, discussion, jokes, whatever. Just like to hear from you. So yeah, I want to start then with the hospice sector's current financial situation. And I'll start with a fairly stark chart, actually. And what this shows is every year, in fact, every quarter now, we do a benchmarking exercise with all of the finance directors from around the place. We've got nearly 100 actually hospices involved now in that benchmarking, which gives us the opportunity to give you quite up-to-date figures. So we're not relying on kind of the previous year's annual reports. So what that's showing us right now is that for the first time in, I think, Hospice UK's history, it is the worst possible financial situation, I'm afraid, that hospices have been in. So collectively, the actual outturn estimated for the last financial year, we think, is in the region of £50 million deficit. It's not quite as bad as we budgeted for. So we budgeted, you all budgeted for about 188 million deficit. But yeah, it's still a really worrying and concerning picture. And just to give you some context, when you look at 22, 23, the actual outturn for that year was a surplus of 25 million. So it is a difficult time for us. Looking at sort of the breakdown for income for a typical adult hospice, probably a lot of you will see this and think that that's very familiar, and of course it is. And you know, with the three big income streams remain retail income, statutory income, and fundraising income. I think what's really interesting, though, is that for the first time, we're seeing more of a contribution to hospice care from retail income than we are from statutory income. And there's something that just doesn't feel very fair about that. And it's the first time, I think, that it's happened. So we're making quite a big thing about that at the moment, and I'll be interested to hear your reflections on it too. When we look at reserves, there are significant variations. We've got kind of two extremes on either end, where some hospices have, 30 months worth of free reserves, or nearly 30 months worth of free reserves. Whereas the other end of the scale, we've got hospices that only have 3 months worth of reserves. So again, it's a worrying picture. The mean for this is around 10 months, 9 or 10 months is the sort of average. So again, that's not a great situation. But when you look at those hospices that have less than 6 months in reserves, we're talking nearly a quarter of all hospices. So again, a sort of worrying sign. This graph shows the performance of this year compared to last year. And the bars above zero are where there's growth. So you can see that actually statutory income is growing, retail income is doing quite well, fundraising is growing, other income is growing. Legacy income is the only one that's down on last year. But the really key thing, I think, here is how much worse off we are in terms of the costs, both payroll costs and non-payroll costs. That's really where the problems lie, is that costs are rising to such an extent that it's putting a real pressure on our finances. So the key points really to take away from this, I think, is for the first year ever since we've been collecting data, that the sector has recorded a deficit. So that's really quite significant. But crucially, what that looks like, how the sort of impact of that is that we're looking at nearly a fifth of hospices have now cut or are currently planning to cut services. So we have a sort of urgent crisis, really, for many of our hospices, which needs addressing urgently, obviously. Looking at next year, talking again to that group of 100 finance directors from hospices, it's looking like it will be almost as bad as this year. And as I've said, rising costs are really the main issue. When it comes to income trends, legacy income is up about 22% on budget. But as I say, it's still slightly down on last year. And hospices invest about 3% of fundraising spend on legacy marketing, whereas the wider charity sector is spending double that. So that's really something for us to think about. And I'll be coming on to legacies a bit later. I know some of you have asked about the legacy campaign, which I'm happy to give an update on. We forecast really large growth in charity legacies in coming years. So the question I have really for you today is your hospice doing enough in legacy marketing? Surprisingly, statutory income is up 8% on last year. And I say surprisingly because the current narrative around statutory income is not a very positive one. Lots of hospices really struggling to secure multi-term deals. Sometimes they don't know what's happening next month. Really, the funding is taking a long time to come through to where it's needed, and it's not in a long-term way. As I say, retail is now the largest single gross income stream for hospices, rising above statutory. So we should probably be thinking about really how we invest in retail more, given that it seems to be giving the biggest income for us. Of course, there are growing costs, we know, with retail, but I think innovation around that is key. And then actually interest on investments are up on last year, which is positive. So that's the picture, and I'm sorry I can't be the bearer of slightly better news, but at least I'm talking to a group of fundraisers, and I know that we always dig very deep when we're faced with this adversity, and I'm sure this time is no different. So the opportunities, I think, as I see them, and of course with such a big question, how do we solve the funding crisis for UK hospices? There is no one-size-fits-all solution. But I think there are probably 5 key components, 5 key opportunities that we need to make sure that we are all over. Probably the biggest of those is statutory funding. And I think we probably need a two-pronged approach to statutory funding, because some hospices have an urgent need right now for funding. But we don't just want bailouts after bailouts. So there is a real need for us to, at the same time, be having serious conversations and productive conversations about a fair, sustainable funding deal for hospices long term. I'll come on to this a little bit more in a sec. The next, I think, as I've alluded to, is around retail. We need to be capitalising on the growth that we're experiencing. I think we should be really investing in retail and certainly innovating. I know there's a lot of innovation across the sector. I'd love to hear from you if you are doing something that's working for you in the retail sector. And I know there's a lot of hospices now looking at warehouse type shops, as well as specialist home shops, vintage shops, etc. So I think retail is one that we can't ignore. When it comes to fundraising, and I'm sure Ash will tell me slightly differently later, and I'm happy to be challenged, but I think that we have been quite affected by the cost of living crisis, particularly on our kind of classic community fundraising, our event fundraising. People don't want to ask their friends for sponsorship as much as they did. And I see that there are lots of gaps in hospice fundraising when it comes to some of the high value stuff. Where there's not a lot of investment in trust and foundation fundraising, for example. I really think we need to be investing hugely in corporate There's a big opportunity in major donors. So I think that's really where our efforts need to be, as well as obviously maintaining the community and the supporter bread and butter fundraising that will always be, at the heart. Digital's an interesting one. I think the future is digital, and our audience is going to be getting younger, and it's really important that we do invest in digital. But crucially, I think we need different skills than perhaps the fundraising workforce makeup that we have currently. I think it's all about testing and investing, and it's a difficult one to get through boards when you're trying to cut costs elsewhere. And when you can't prove that something's going to work, and actually most of what you try won't work, but we have to be in this market, otherwise we are just going to be left behind. Legacies is an exciting one, and there's lots of good news around legacies. We do quite well as a sector from legacies anyway, as you know, but it's crucial, I think, that we have such a big opportunity with the lovely baby boomers who are both numerous and wealthy, and we know that they're obviously starting to die now, and will be over the next few decades, which gives us just a huge opportunity. So hopefully many of you are already investing in legacy marketing and involved in the national campaign that we're planning, and I'll give a bit more of an update in a sec. But legacy is an exciting opportunity for us. And the final thing I think I've just generally called commercialization, and it's quite a big one really, but I think it's about perhaps sweating the assets that we have. And that can be anything from, looking at the sort of physical assets we have, perhaps our actual buildings, and whether there's any way to monetize that, parking, land, solar panels, selling, creating energy, selling it back to the grid. Diversification, a fleet of coffee vans. I know one hospice that bought a tourist train. We should be thinking really much broader than just fundraising now. And again, I think it requires a different skill set that we need to be making sure that we're looking for. And of course, diversifying. We don't want all our eggs in just a few baskets. So, and I have to caveat this section because I'm not I don't work in policy, I don't work in advocacy, I'm a fundraiser as well. But I thought it was important to cover how we are dealing with government, and what our hospice fundraising ask is for the new government. So if you've got any detailed policy questions, do please ask, but I may not be able to answer them fully. I'll do my best, but of course I will absolutely get you answers from our team of experts in-house. So yeah, we're in an interesting place, I think, and it feels like a place of opportunity, actually. We've got a brand new government following the general election, many new MPs. So obviously one of the priorities at the moment for all of us is to form new relationships with those MPs and the supporter base that we've classically had in Parliament. Interestingly, now that we have this sort of Labour landslide, it does mean that they don't have huge opposition to their policies, and they do have a mandate to make changes. So there could be a real opportunity here if we position it in the right way, of course, including health and social care. Wes Streeting and Stephen Kinnock, so Secretary of State for Health and Social Care and the Social Care Minister, do have a genuine interest in palliative and end-of-life care, but it's not a priority for them. And fixing hospice funding in itself is not an appealing proposition. So what we need to do, I think, is prove that putting hospice funding on a sustainable footing helps the government to achieve their goals around health and care for this country. We should be part of the solution. The other thing that's been interesting with our conversations with civil servants, etc., I think has been actually now they've got their feet under the desk. They're seeing that actually public finances are really stretched. And so the government doesn't have lots of new pots of money to spend. In fact, I think if anything, they'll be looking to scale back rather than increase spending, which gives us an interesting challenge. So getting policy through Treasury, I think, will be harder than ever before. we've got a couple of challenges, I think, and one of them is how good you all are at your jobs, because we are arguing at Hospice UK that funding is not sustainable or fair. But to the Treasury, it is great value for money. Communities are supporting it. It is being paid for. Why change it? And the other issue we have to get around is kind of, if you think back to that sort of reserves chart, not all hospices need more money. The sector is very effective at fundraising. There are good reserves for lots of hospices. And of course, the funding flows from integrated care boards and commissioners rather than central government. So the government almost see it as, well, look, we've devolved that responsibility, speak to them. So I think the solutions top line have to be, again, around, we shouldn't be out there demanding funding and being a real antagonist. We very much want to make an offer to government and act as a partner. How can hospices help the government with their general goals around health and social care? How can we be, part of the solution to the problems they're trying to solve, rather than giving them more problems to solve? So we need to be thinking very carefully about what the Labour government's priorities are around health and social care. And I think Hospice UK, we need to be very much telling a positive story about what hospices can do to help with NHS pressures, the additional capacity that we can free up by the services that we offer. And of course, we know that by 2040, there'll be another 130,000 people dying. So this is the demand for end of life and palliative care is only going to increase. Collectively, I think there are 4 key things that we need to do at the moment as a hospice movement. And it might sound obvious, but we do need to agree collectively what we want to put to government. There is a number of different options that we can put. And I think we need to think carefully about what the most pragmatic and the ones that are most likely to have success. As I say, I think ideally we want long-term sustainable fair funding, not just emergency bailouts. The reality is we do need both. So I think we need to be talking to government about a stabilising fund and then more a strategizing approach. So to stabilising, strategizing. The stabilising is the short-term, urgent, almost emergency funding that we need to keep some hospices and services still afloat and still operating, whilst the strategizing is much more of a long-term strategic approach about how we're going to fund hospice care in this country. Crucially, we need data to evidence our value, and that really can only come from all of you. But we need to be going to government with data, with really strong data arguments about population need and capacity and how we can meet that need. And we also need to make sure that we've got a common language, tariffs here and bed days, and we need to make sure that across the sector we're all using the same things to mean the same things. So I think we need to do a little bit of work on that. And crucially, I think I've said this now 3 times, but we need to position hospices as part of the solution to the problem. So what is Hospice UK doing around all of this and to help with the funding issue? And hopefully this will be of use to you. So the way that we've kind of got 3 main ways that we approach our sort of policy and advocacy work. And at the moment, we're campaigning for sustainable and fair funding for hospices. And hopefully you've seen some of the media coverage. There's been quite a lot of it in recent months, calling for fairer funding for hospices. But the sort of thing that we do is we work with civil servants and other stakeholders to identify the main challenges that are facing hospices. And we also work with kind of other partners, often national partners like Marie Curie, Sue Ryder, Together for Short Lives, the National Bereavements Alliance, those sorts of partners, so that we can come collectively and stronger to government. And we did a piece of work with all of those partners on the manifestos for palliative and end-of-life care, and I was really delighted that the three major parties included palliative and end-of-life care in all of their manifestos, which was brilliant. We've had some recent success in Wales, where we've secured £4 million to support Welsh hospices, which was the gap in funding that they needed. And yeah, it's just about kind of making sure that we are influencing parliamentarians, MPs, ministers, and here's Toby, our chief exec, who probably most of you have seen, I think, with Rachel Reeves, the now Chancellor. The second sort of thing that we really try and do on the back of that is kind of really build parliamentary pressure. And that can take the form of a number of things. And these are some of the things that have happened recently. So the picture there of the four people in a panel is the Health and Social Care Select Committee, which looked specifically at hospice funding, which Toby spoke at, which was really, really good. At the bottom there, you've got report finds current setup of hospice funding not fit for purpose. And that report was the all-party parliamentary group that we ran that looked into palliative and end-of-life care and has come up with recommendations. So we are making progress. And then the final thing we do around sort of building parliamentary pressure is to make sure that, you know, we're speaking and lobbying MPs to raise issues in Parliament with specific questions, for example, which helps us really build pressure on decision makers and gain momentum. The final sort of part of the jigsaw, if you like, for campaigning is around media and campaigning activity. And we've had some great success right in the last few weeks with this campaign, which we call our Write to Your MP campaign, where we're asking people to write to their local MP, and it generates a template. It's very, very easy to do. And then that goes off to their local MP, raising the concerns about hospice funding right now in the UK. We've had 15,000 people do that now, which is fantastic. One hospice, we need hospices to help, by the way, with all of this, of course. One hospice who's done a particularly good job rallied their local supporters, and their local MP received 600 letters, which, you know, is the kind of pressure that we want. And on the back of that, what we're looking for is we're looking to have meetings with MPs so that we can raise the issue of hospice care and hospice funding and cutting services and so on. And so far we've got 20 such meetings with local MPs, which is really good. And I hope that we'll be getting a lot more. How we then go about sort of building more MP support is we obviously aim to brief as many MPs as possible on the challenges facing hospice care and how we need a different approach to the funding. If MPs come through and are interested in meeting, we will always aim to conduct that meeting jointly with a local hospice, because MPs love to hear from you directly, local hospices. It's a much more powerful story if we can kind of get local MPs and local hospices together. I'm sure you know your local MPs already, but that's really, really powerful. We're looking to reconstitute a new all-party parliamentary group on hospice and end-of-life care. And this time we'll be sharing the secretariat with Marie Curie and Sue Ryder, which I think will be beneficial. Obviously, we'll be very much championing independent hospices and so on. And we'll need a new Labour co-chair, because I think the Conservative ones may have lost their seats. We'll be running events at Labour and Tory party conferences this year. And obviously, there's a big opportunity, I think, around assisted dying and the debate there, and making sure that we are taking all the opportunities to ensure that access to palliative care and the sustainability of hospice services is front and centre at that debate. And then finally, just a small thing, but I'm just currently working on the details of Hospice Care Week. We are going to do a focus on funding and probably retail. And we're planning a sort of, well, I call it a parliamentary event. It's probably going to be a bit more of a stunt, but it will be in Westminster and it will be quite fun. So just looking at time, I've got a few more minutes, but that's fine. I've not got many more slides to go through. So I just wanted to then move on from statutory funding and talk about the other big effort, I think, around to really improve our sustainable funding, which is the National Hospice Legacy Campaign. And just wanted to give you a very brief update. I'm happy to take questions or speak to people outside of this as well. But yes, just to give you a very quick update, our aim, of course, is to drive awareness of hospice care and consideration of leaving a gift in your will to your local hospice, So far, we have 142 hospices signed up across England, Scotland, and Wales, which is just fantastic, really blown away. And of course, what that translates to is that we have a budget of nearly £1 million, which means we can compete significantly with nearest and dearest, such as the Macmillans and the WaterAids and the Marie Curies and what have you of the world. The fees are based on the size of hospice, and in this case, national charities are excluded, including Hospice UK, Sue Ryder, and Marie Curie. What we're going to be doing is what we call a national brand response TV campaign, which is very exciting. So it's principally a brand campaign, but there will be an element of call to action and pushing to a search term and then pushing out to local hospices. The campaign is due to launch mid-February. And the other part to the brand TV campaign, which is incredibly important, is the local campaign. And we'll be providing an extensive toolkit with lots of materials so that you can activate the campaign locally and put your own local messaging in. And there's going to be some webinars coming up. The first one, I think, is the 11th of September. For those of you who are participating, those emails should have gone out today, but do get in touch if you're worried you're not on the list. Where we're at with the campaign is that we've finished now the research phase, which was really interesting. And we finished the creative development phase, which everybody, I think all 142 hospices have inputted into. So it's been quite an exciting process. And we're now going into the production phase, which is also quite exciting because it's things like casting and scripting and shooting, which is all very good. If you haven't signed up yet and would still like to, then there is still opportunity to do that. The absolute cutoff for that is the 6th of December. 6th of September, because we need the final numbers as we go into sort of the production phase. And what we'd really like to do with this campaign is, we want it to be something that we return to annually, definitely for the next 3 years. And hopefully it's something that you feel that you can keep investing in and that your boards are sort of behind. So how can you help? What can we do together? So I think there are some simple things, really. Amplifying the national media campaigns I've described locally is so helpful. You've seen that with the Write to Your MP campaign. It really does. That pincer movement just works. So please keep doing what you're doing. Please do fill out as well our data surveys to help us make the case. I know you probably get a lot of data surveys from Hospice UK, workforce, capacity, all sorts, but it's so important that we've got that national picture that we can then say, look what the hospice sector is doing to help you, NHS, and that's why we need more funding. Do lobby your local MPs, crucial that you continue to do that. Sign up to the Legacy campaign if you haven't already. We've already discussed the importance of legacy, so it'd be great to have you on board. Do join either our network, which is called Hospice UK Income Generation Leaders, or sign up to our bulletin, and that has lots of details about funding opportunities, grants available to you, other opportunities, case studies, that sort of thing. And finally, visit the Hospice UK Innovation Hub. It's on our website. It has lots and lots of examples of fantastic hospice, income generation, innovation, and learning events as well. But certainly, if you're interested in who's doing what on retail and commercialization of assets, there's loads of stuff on our website that you can have a look at. Yes.
You did it. Wonderful.
It.
Just over the half an hour. Catherine, thank you so much. There was just so much information in there and so much detail and content. I know there's lots of questions coming in. I'm going to hold. I've got a couple of observations that I'll make, but I'll sum up that at the end if I may. Thank you everyone for posting your questions in the chat. Amy, are you able to sort of identify the most common ones? I know there's a few coming in about the legacy campaign recently.
Well, everybody's listening so intently that they only all just came in right now. So I'm not going to be able to tell you which ones are the most common.
Okay, we can have a look at that, those. So
But
the
if
first, so
we, why
oh,
don't we start with the, because we're looking at the legacy campaign then, and as anticipated, there's quite a few questions about that. So Bexa Rowans has asked, what did your research tell you to inform the creative development? And do you have channels or times of broadcast that you're looking at?
Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, the research was really interesting, actually. It identified kind of four audiences. The audience that we would all suspect, I think, and is our bread and butter, are those people who already know and love the hospice. And what was interesting is when you spoke to those people who had a fairly long-term relationship with the hospice, it was almost like you were talking to hospice staff. They had such a big awareness of what the hospice does and the breadth of services. But perhaps what was a very important finding for us was the next group who did have experience of hospice care, but for them it might have been quite a short-term thing. It might have been that they were sort of referred from hospital and their loved one died maybe days or even hours later. And for them, it was quite a sad experience. They still rated hospice care and hospices, but they didn't identify with kind of almost the joyful descriptions of the first audience. So how that informed the creative was that we needed to find those bittersweet moments. It wasn't all about birthday parties and bringing your horse and having your wedding, and which is the wonderful, joyful things that hospices do every day. But actually, it was really important that we identified those sort of poignant, sad moments so that we didn't alienate that group. The other key thing that came from the research was that when we showed, I suppose, the myths around hospice care and people not really understanding what it is and the breadth of services. And when we started to describe what hospices did, they were blown away by that. And they found that very, very motivating. But what came through was that we didn't need to tell them everything, just the illusion of more than a hospital bed in a room was really motivating. So you'll see when you see the final ad, that the care doesn't just take place in a inpatient unit in a hospice. It's all over the place, and that idea of more was very motivating. There's a whole deck on it, and I'm really happy to sort of share that. An email's gone out this morning actually with the full details if you need more. On the channel selection, we're just starting the media planning, and I mean, it would kind of be what you'd expect. Lots of ITV, 1, 2, 3, 4, Channel 5, Channel 4, lots of satellite channels, National Geographic, Sky, Discovery, those sorts of things. So it will be a really, really broad channel mix. And we hope to reach 10 million adults with it. And I think when we're on air in February, if everybody else does what we predict, we'll be the highest weighting ad out there, which will be fantastic.
And Catherine, is that going to be added to with social content as well as the BRTV stuff?
So we will, as part of the sort of national stuff, we will do paid search. That's a really important part of the campaign, and we're just debating how we do that. But we'll probably have all of the hospice search terms within that. The social media will be more for local hospices to do as part of the activation toolkit that they'll receive. So we'll provide the assets, but then it's customizable so those hospices can really make it their own, changing the messaging, but sort of keeping the campaign hook in. Yeah.
So knowing obviously the timings of that therefore are crucial, because that means all the hospice digital teams will be able to plan the rollout of visual messaging.
And just on that, so we'll be doing 2 webinars in the next few months. There's one on September the 11th, and then there's one towards the end of September. which came out in the update this morning. Please do register for that if you're part of the Legacy campaign. And then there'll be one towards about 3 weeks before the campaign airs. So that'll be in February, which will just be a final, right, you need to do this now. So hopefully that will cover everything. There'll be opportunities to ask questions and interact in those webinars.
Wonderful, thank you.
All right. So obviously one of the questions someone has asked is more information about the campaign and how to sign up. Catherine, obviously, if you supply us with that, we can send that out with the link to the webinar when we've got it up, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Cool. So just following on with the campaign, Karen asks, is the Legacy campaign content adult hospice focused or relevant creative for children's hospices as well?
Yeah, it's relevant for all hospices. We have a steering group that are very strict, and they're representative of all types of hospice. So we have children's hospice on there, we have adults hospice, we've got a hospice that is children's and adults, we've got a hospice at home service, we've got Scotland represented, because obviously there's different cultural sensitivities that we need to be aware of in Wales and Scotland, and different versions and accents and things. So yes, it is completely relevant for children's and adults hospices. There'll be stories of adults and children's within it, and some are mixed. The way it works is more just telling emotive family stories.
Thank you for that. Okay, so we've got a couple of other questions just moving off of the Legacy campaign for the moment. Ash, I don't know if you wanted to add anything about legacies while we're still talking about it.
I see the comments. Sally, you were asking about the cost of future campaigns, and again, I know that's something you'll be able to answer. Well, I suppose see how you get on this year, and then you'll know what the kind of funding situation. I think the overall on legacies, absolutely agree with you in the need to dynamically push forward the communication around legacy. A lot of the work that we do in the hospice movement is about promoting legacy, but promoting the benefit, not just to the recipients and the patients and family members, but also to the individuals that leave legacy behind, the incredibly positive contribution that is, and the ability to continue one support. But it is, you do have to get out there. The one comment David, I see you put a comment up there. David Berlin's put a comment about the challenge about the internal culture within a hospice. Does that help fundraising, hinder fundraising? Isn't it remarkable that legacy is such a massively important income stream for the hospice movement, and yet as a movement we spend half of the charity average on legacy marketing? I myself, as an ex-director of income generation for hospice, have been told that legacies is what the care team deliver. It's the care deliver that we don't need to talk about it. It'll just come in anyway, and that is simply not true. And the challenge is to make sure that our colleagues understand that this is a circle that we have to communicate, and we're not bashing people over the head with. That's why your legacy messaging is not demanding money with menaces. It's about allowing people to make an informed choice about what they would like to do and how they would like to engage the local charity. But you've got to have the buy-in of the local hospices. And I'm so encouraged you've got 142 signed up, Catherine, because that's a huge number. It really is a big number. And the benefit that comes from that collaborative working, hopefully, will pay dividends and will open the door for all of the fundraisers here to be able to say, yes, let's invest more in these conversations.
I think that's the most exciting thing about this whole campaign is the collaborative nature of it. It really is, all 142 hospices taking part of this. It's the biggest collaboration in the hospice sector since I've worked in it for the last 9 years, and that's the most exciting thing. I just think that the appetite was there and the moment was right, and I hope it's the start of many other initiatives that we can all do together to help with hospice funding, really.
Okay, there's a couple of more techie questions that I'm going to pitch at you from our lovely audience. So Helen at St Joseph's is asking about trust foundations and corporate funders exclude applications from organisations with more than a few months reserves. but you can see that most hospices have between nine. I think you said the median was 8 months, wasn't it?
Yeah,
The
the median is 9 months, and
okay.
the mean is 10 months. To be really technical.
So Helen's asking, I think, a really reasonable question. It's something we get considered. What should a level of reserves be for a hospice, particularly if we go look at the experience we've all been through in the last few
Mm,
years of the pandemic? The conversation that we're having on behalf of our hospice clients with the audiences is it was thanks to legacies, it was thanks to that forethought and that
mm.
carefully accrued income that got us through the pandemic in the first place. It kept the beds open, and now we need to have more sustainable funding. So is it, do you think, a role for Hospice UK to be out there talking to classic hospice funders and saying, actually, you should be encouraging hospices and supporting hospices with a greater level of reserves? Do you think is that a position?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, this reserves debate, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
there's a point, I think, which feels that the reserves are too small, and it feels risky. So anything, I think, sub 6 months for me, my personal opinion is that feels a bit small and a bit risky in this current quite volatile climate. But anything long term as well feels almost irresponsible slightly, that we should be, that money's been given to us to invest on services. So I think there's a really fine balance. And I mean, it's not an exact science. I think 12 months reserves feels about right for the sector at the moment, in terms of where, what we need to do and the commitments that we have. We often have conversations with big trusts and foundations about supporting hospices directly and how they can best do that. You kind of get different types of funder. Often they will, there are quite a few funders at the moment that have recognized that there is a crisis, and so they quite often ask us for information about reserves, which is in the public domain, so that they can look at sort of giving money to the hospices that are worst off. It's a tricky one because I don't know what the right answer is. Should there be a hardship fund for hospices that are really struggling so that they don't have to close services? And is that something that we could persuade not just government but trusts and foundations to sort of pay into?
And that's what the Rousing Foundation did, didn't they? They came in with kind of an emergency funding.
Yeah, they came in with the emergency funding, which they sort of did themselves. So yeah, God knows how they made all the decisions. We did offer some advice, but
so just some feedback from this work that we've done recently. I think trusts and foundations are more open to a larger degree of reserves, but you've got to have the narrative around that. You've got to be able to explain why your reserves level is where it is, and the fact that this is about guaranteeing and securing the future. And if there are more bumps in the road, we need to be able to deal with those. We've recently been working with a hospice where we put in for Wolfson, for example. So most of you listening, if you're doing trusts and foundations, you'll be thinking about Wolfson at some point. They've recently granted a hospice we've been working with 125% of the highest value that we'd actually asked for, because the narrative was so strong. But the other nugget from that experience was one of the funders has gone through to second phase on that particular project, but they're asking, not only it's a capital project, it's not only a capital budget they're asking for, but they're asking for a 10-year revenue budget. So that a lot of funders are fighting shy of risk. They don't want to be putting money into an organization that might look a little bit suspect and dodgy. They want security of that income. They want to know it's going to deliver. But I think they're getting more comfortable with that, a larger, a more comfortable level of reserves, because they see the security that gives you.
I think it helps as well if you have some designated funds within those reserves. So it's not just free reserve sitting there that you've actually, I mean, I know it's only window dressing, but I think that is quite helpful, because then it has exactly what you've said, Ash. It supports that sort of narrative then around it. It's like, well, okay, well, we've got 1 million earmarked for, service innovation or whatever it happens to be, or for investment in fundraising actually would be a good one.
And Bex, you've got a question. I'm going to come to that in a second. I haven't forgotten about you. But while we're talking about investment in fundraising, I think there's a huge challenge there for most of us. I'm familiar with people that we've been working with over for many years now, a couple of instances recently where hospice teams have gone to board of trustees to ask for an investment pot, not particularly a huge amount, but investment pot to be able to launch a fundraising campaign, to be able to reach out to the community and say, hey, there's a problem here, but there's a solution and we need your help. And that request for funding has been turned down because the fundraising is seen as a cost rather than investment, which I find
Ah,
unbelievably frustrating, having been a director of income gen myself. Are
mm.
you seeing that? Are you seeing, what's the mood that you're seeing from your position? Are you seeing people kind of willing to get out there and get engaged and communicate, or are you seeing the reins being brought in?
A bit of both, really. I think the legacy stuff has been encouraging because obviously some people, some hospices were able to just sign that off like that. Others had to take it to their boards, and I was really positively encouraged that the boards did seem to see this as an investment. But it drives me mad that, you know, fundraising is seen as a cost, and also that you're asked to provide, you know, a business case that shows immediate returns. Well, it's not going to be immediate. You know, the investment comes over often years, but it's so important that, you know, it is seen as an investment, and cutting fundraising costs is not I don't think it's a sound business move. You know, we need to be investing in our income sources and innovating and trying things and testing.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make one point, actually, just
Oh,
it
please.
reminded me around trusts and foundations,
Yeah.
because I think that's probably an area where staff-wise we're slightly underinvested as a sector. And I did see a hospice recently that were actually the two London hospices, and they were sharing a trust fundraiser, and they were doing sort of individual bids, joint bids, and they were having some real success with that. And I thought that was a great idea.
I think it's absolutely on. We do a lot of trust and foundation fundraising for our charity clients involving hospice, a lot of capital appeal type stuff. What funders are wanting to see is security and efficiency. They want to get the maximum benefit for their investment. So outside of the hospice movement, we're working with two very similar charities, one working in one part of the world, the other working in the other part of the world, but they do the same stuff. So actually the conversation there is about let's do joined up working. And what funders like, the big funders, institutional ones particularly, they like it when they've got organizations say, look, here's us maximizing benefit. And if you look at the way that hospices have learned during the pandemic, for example, a lot of clinical teams began working together and sharing information in a way that hadn't happened before. Fundraising is starting to do that as well. There's nothing to stop hospices, particularly local hospices that share an area, to be saying, right, let's look strategically at what our shared need is, and let's make a collegiate approach to these big funders so that we're maximizing the benefit. It saves you money on fundraising. It saves you money on delivery as well. I think it's really important. Yeah, I do know it's a tough environment out there for recruitment at the moment. A few of our hospice clients have been trying to recruit trust fundraisers and just can't get anywhere.
Yeah.
The one thing I'd say about that is we're all, look at us on screens now. We're all used to being on screens. One of our hospice clients, their trust fundraiser is in Cyprus, and she's brilliant. She delivers great results. You don't have to have someone on the ground as long as you've got a good connection with clinical, because trust fundraisers need to know what's happening in clinical and need to know where the movement is. That's going to be important. There's a couple of other questions comes in. Bex, you've been sat there very patiently, and I think this is your other head talking about with the grants bit head on here. So currently awarded grants have to be claimed retrospectively. Given that we know the funding crisis affecting hospices, will Hospice UK consider awarding passing on the donation of the grant at the time of notification being successful? We're applying because we need the money to deliver the project, but we still have to pay from the hospice's pocket in the first instance and then claim back. So there's a kind of cash flow issue there, I suppose, in that instance. Is that something that you're able to answer?
It's often linked to the funder and the way that the money comes through from them. But yeah, if ever you have a situation, please do speak to us, call me or call Carl Ben, my head of grants. And we'll see what we can work with, because we certainly don't want you to not be applying for grants. We want more people applying for grants, not less. So
you're a facilitator, not a barrier, are you? That's the point.
yeah, absolutely. And if you're struggling with a grant application, just speak to Carl or Matthew on the team. They will walk you through it. We don't want anyone, because they've got a trust fundraiser for half a day a week, to be missing out on on grants just because of exam technique. You know, we will literally walk you through it and, you know, tell you what the most important criteria is that you need to fill.
Right. Okay. One final from Annie. Because retail costs are very high, this makes the return on investment look not as good when combined with fundraising, and this affects certain trusts and foundation grants. Do some hospices, and this may be something that you kind of answer and other people might have the information, do some hospices recommend keeping the trading company separate or having retail as part of the main charity?
That's probably a question for everybody on this call. My experience is that I think most hospices have it as a separate trading company, but I might not be completely accurate at that. We certainly have a separate trading company at Hospice UK for kind of more commercial type things, and that works well.
I think a lot of hospices will do, and certainly for us, for example, if we have to charge VAT on a particular piece of work that we're doing, that can go through the trading company.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Explain that. I think it is a challenge, and again, it's another conversation about reserves. What's interesting for me, and just so again, speaking to people listening, I think when we go in and we're pulling together a case of support or we're pulling together applications for a big trust, we look at the accounts and we go and look at how the accounts are expressed. The challenge sometimes is the way that the finance team reports it, in that we've got all of the income put in one lump, but then what you've got is the cost of delivery is either lumped in where it's not lumped in on income, or it's separated out where it's not separated out on income. So sometimes it's really difficult to actually show the ratio in income of retail to retail and fundraising to fundraising, because it makes the fundraising look much less effective than it is. So it's really helpful to be able to have that real clarity of where retail investment spend. And a lot of retail is delivering, you know, huge margins at the moment. There's some hospices that are delivering, you know, so 25-30% margin on their retail activity, which is absolutely fantastic. And you're right at the very start, you talked about it's the vintage, it's the wedding outfits, it's the tech, it's the big warehouse furniture type ones that are working. And there's lots and lots of knowledge. Catherine, you and I talked about this weeks ago, didn't we? And said that although you don't have a specific kind of function for that, there is the Charity Retail Association, which offers that forum, and there's a lot of knowledge and experience, and hospices are part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we do cover this topic as well through the network. And I would say, actually, thinking about it, I can probably start to include more questions around retail specifically in that financial benchmarking I mentioned, because it would be really useful actually to know how many operate a separate trading company. So I'll work that into the next quarter's wording.
Barbara Ann just very kindly put on that we took legal advice on whether we should maintain a standalone trading arm a couple of years ago, and auditors asked the question. The advice is very clearly keep them separate.
Yeah.
So we'll go to that. Thank you so much. I'm just looking at the time. We're coming up 5 minutes to go. I'm going to take the privilege of co-hosting with you. So I wanted to give you just a couple of bits of download. I'm so grateful, Kathleen, because that's a lot of stuff. That's a
I
lot
hope
of
that was helpful, everybody.
No, hugely. And I know that you're there and we're here. We are part of a community. We are part of a movement, and we're here to support. Now, both Hospice UK has its own, you've got your own mission. Pebblebeach, we're here to support hospices and charities as we do, but we're all part of the family that wants everyone to succeed. And if we've got knowledge and experience that we can freely give to help someone out, then fantastic. Please come and get that. Yeah. And Pebblebeach, we're absolutely up for that as well. The thing you talked about right at the start was working together. We all know a lot, but every single person here, every single person in on this call knows something that almost nobody else does. You've got a little nugget of knowledge, experience, of education that's special and precious to you, and sharing that. So the forums, I'm going to add Hospice Income Generation Network into that conversation as well, because that's also an important forum to be able to share information as well. The benchmarking, the fact that you're regularly benchmarking now, Catherine, I think is absolutely crucial, because we need to know where we are. We need to know what does exemplary look like, what does worrying look like. We need to know where we are, and sometimes, particularly when we're working with boards of trustees who don't come from that commercial background, sometimes it's difficult to understand on the business case, where are we. one of the things we do, obviously, you're benchmarking performance and experience. One of the things we do, Phoebe, over the last 15 years, we developed a fundraising data model where we can benchmark a hospice fundraising database. I think most of the people on here have already had that at some point from us, but if you haven't, and if you want to come back and relive that, we can look at a fundraising database and directly compare now with almost the 100 hospices we've got in our model to say, right, this is where your Light Up a Life is at. This is where your IMO game's at. This is what your events program is looking like. And here's how that compares. So for fundraisers, I think I created that benchmarking model way back in almost 20 years ago because I needed to know where we were. I needed to know what good looked like, and there wasn't a point of reference. So we've worked over the last 16 years at creating that model. So please come and ask us about that if you can. The one thing I'm going to say, and David Berlin, who's here, has added that in the chat as well, is that need to communicate. This stuff doesn't just come in. The income, yes, will arrive. We will continue to look after local people, and their loved ones will continue to be grateful and say thank you, and they'll come in with an in memoriam donation or take part in an event, etc. But actually, it's only when we get out there and we talk with directness and dynamism about the problem and the solution that fundraising income needs, whatever the conversation you're able to deliver with statutory funding and MPs and government, there will be a need for the majority of income coming from the community. And we mustn't be afraid as a movement in getting out there and saying that and being really clear. Your legacy example of 3%, 6% is exactly right. So when St Barnabas Hospice was rebuilt in 2008, the campaign launched in 2008, the new hospice opened in 2011. It's down the south coast in Worthing. 5 years later, I was giving a tour of another hospice senior management team. We were lucky. We went down to St Barnabas, and Hugh, the chief exec there, hosted us around. And as we were walking around, this was 5 years after the hospice opened, he said, it's absolutely remarkable. One of the messages, one of the key parts of the capital campaign back in from 2008, 2009, 2010 was about giving in wills, because actually a large part of the pot that made the new bill possible was carefully secured legacy income. Said here we are 5 years later, we're suddenly seeing a huge uptick in the number of legacy gifts coming in, because it was that need expressed at the time of build in that case. And for some people, they couldn't respond by doing a bike ride, or they couldn't respond by making a donation. They responded by thinking about their will, and they responded by putting the hospice into their will. And those decisions started to come through 5, 6, 7 years later. So it is absolutely the case that you won't be able to ever go to a board of trustees and say, look, £10 invested in legacy fundraising today equals £25 next week. But you can absolutely demonstrate that investment in the communication and the theory and the conversation around legacy marketing definitely will move the needle. It'll be 5, 6, 7 years, but it will move the needle. Catherine, I wonder whether you've got evidence of that when fundraising is invested in, it pays off. I know we have as well. I'm really happy to share that. So if any fundraiser is having that challenging conversation with a board or a SRT at the moment going, I know I want to do this, I know I want to make it work, but I'm just not being allowed. If you want evidence to back up that business case, I'm happy for them to get in touch with us, Catherine. Give evidence of where you invest, guys. It works. Come and get the evidence, and we can help that conversation.
Definitely, and also do see our website where there are lots and lots of kind of case studies of successful income generation. With boards. So.
And same for us as well. Again, if you go to our website, guys, you'll see there's plenty of hospice fundraising experience and experience. And just lastly, just over the hour, sorry, we'll shut up in a second. The hardest thing, the thing that most people are worried about at the moment in terms of just individual giving, is about regular giving. Yeah, asking people to sign up to something, that commitment. And oh my God, we're just coming out of the pandemic. How can we possibly ask people? We've just recently, in the last few months, relaunched regular giving for one of our hospice partners. We're all waiting to see how it's gone on. It's gone brilliantly. We've had a fantastic role. They've had a fantastic response, upgrades, people coming in, signing up new. There was one individual who came in and multiplied their monthly gift tenfold, because the message went out there saying, actually, we've come out of the pandemic. We've got here we are, but we've got a job of work to do to get to that position of safety, and income, predictable, secure income, is part of the need that we have to make that journey possible. Can you help? they responded. The community responded. If all the evidence we've had of the last since the pandemic, came to a close, when we get out there and we look people in the eye and we tell them about the opportunity that they can have to support their local hospice, they take it. But you've got to get out there and you've got to spread the word. Right. Enough preaching. Catherine, can I just say on behalf of everyone here, thank you so much for giving us your time. That was just so useful, so inspirational. Please, everyone, join me in saying thank you to Catherine. Hospice UK is there for all of us and all of you as a resource. So are we. Come and get it. Come and ask us questions. Don't be shy. We're all part of the same family. So come along. Catherine,